Hi guys, this is chapter 11, key issues 1 and 2. It's very, very short, so I'm just going to get into it. We're talking about industrialization, site and situation, and labor. So some of it should be a bit of a review. Okay, so I know that you guys probably know this really well by now, but just since you haven't talked about it in a while, remember there are five economic sectors: primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, and quinary. Primary is the extraction of resources like agriculture and mining. Secondary is manufacturing work. Tertiary is most jobs, actually: lawyers, teachers, anything where there's a service, retail, restaurants, all of that stuff. Anything where you're disseminating something, right? So if primary is getting the stuff, secondary is making the stuff into things, tertiary is the distribution of those things, okay? What are the hiccups? Sorry. Quaternary is like management, CEOs, venture capitalists, right? People who are in charge. And then quinary is like the research sector, so scientists and pollsters, people who do research on like elections would even be a good example of a quinary job. Okay? All right. So I had you read that article on the Industrial Revolution after your last test. And that's really important because this is where all of this stuff begins, right? So England is the first to industrialize in the mid-19th century. The Industrial Revolution, which we've talked about before, is when machines come into play, right? So instead of handmade crafts, we start to make machine-made crafts and have the machines do a lot of work for us. Machines are really large, so they cannot fit in people's homes anymore, so cottage industries mostly are gone in Europe by the end of the Industrial Revolution because all of that work has moved to factories, right? All of these new machines, however, relied on different resources like water power, coal, and iron. So England had all those resources, but they were quickly running low on them, so they had to go find resources elsewhere. And this is where kind of industrialization and imperialism kind of collide, because where they found a lot of those resources were those countries that they would go on to colonize, right, in Africa. So, let's see. So because all the factories were in the cities, people started to move from the countryside to the cities, which we call urbanization. We're going to talk about that a lot more next unit because next unit is about urban geography. So this is a picture of Manchester during the Industrial Revolution. It quickly became really, really crowded. Lots of health problems came with it, and that's actually what your book that you're reading in English is about next, is the ghost map. I don't think it's about Manchester, but it's about a Manchester-like city. I think it might be about London. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I read it a year ago. Okay. Also, I kind of talked about this on the last slide, but that increased need for natural resources, right, means that they're going to go to Africa and Asia to find those things, okay? And there's going to be lots of you pointed out that there in your QCQ that there was a lot of competition between England and other countries, right? England did not want other countries to industrialize. They wanted to be the top. So it really was a scramble competition for Africa to see who could get like the best land and the most land in Africa. Okay, totally switching gears. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to mention something really quick about the Industrial Revolution. So when we talk about the industrialization of countries, we would talk about those core countries. Those are the ones that industrialized first, right? The semi-periphery are kind of in industrialization right now and getting close to being a core country. And you'll notice that the periphery nations were the ones who were exploited, right? The ones that the core countries used for resources. So just trying to bring some Wallerstein in that as well. Okay, does that make sense? Okie doke. Sorry. All right, now this is a really important model that is not in your book. It's one of my biggest complaints with your book is that this is something that is always on a test. They've even had an FRQ on the Weber model in the past. It's not terribly difficult to understand. I don't know why they don't have it in your book, but I'm going to go over it with you here, and then we're also going to do a map journal in class. But I would just draw yourselves a little Alfred Weber model in your notes right now, and then when we do it in class, it'll be even easier for you. Okay, so the model focuses on the location of industries and focuses on the desire of owners to minimize transportation costs, okay? So very much like von Thunen, we're looking at transportation costs with Weber, but Weber isn't looking at agricultural land use, they're looking at locations of industries, okay? So big difference, and you always want to write down why Weber's different than any other model, like what it's looking for specifically. Okay. So in your book, it talks about bulk gaining or bulk reducing products, okay? And actually, your book calls it bulk, but your test is probably going to call it weight gaining or weight reducing. So when you it's the same thing when you say weight reducing versus bulk gaining. It's the same stuff, okay? So bulk gaining would be a product that gets heavier as it goes through the manufacturing process. So bottling is an example. So you make bottles, but then once you put something in them, they get much heavier, right? So that is a bulk gaining or weight gaining product, okay? A bulk reducing or bulk reducing or weight reducing, product would be like paper, okay? So paper comes from lumber. The lumber is much larger than the stacks of paper that you're going to get and a lot heavier, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so if the product gets lighter as it is developed, bulk reducing, an owner would want to plant the factory closer to the resources. So let's go back to our paper example. If you own a paper factory, a paper mill, you're going to want to put your factory close to where the lumber comes from, right? Close to the forest, because then you don't have to transport the heavy wood very far. Your longer route is just transporting the paper, and that's much lighter. Okay, if a product is bulk gaining, if it gets heavier, then you want that to be closer to the market, not from the resources. So if you're a bottling factory, you would want to be, you don't need to be close to where the resources for the bottles come from. You want to be close to where they get bottled and distributed to markets. Does that make sense? Basically, whatever the longer trip is, you want that to be the lightest trip. Heavier, the more expensive. Okay, so our model here, this is called Thirsty Town. And you can do this with any product, but this is a bottling product, okay? So let's see. So this is a 10-mile road. 10-mile road. This is actually a beer bottling factory. So here's your resources. You have your hops and your grains. You have your mountain spring water. Okay. Here's a railway. This says 6 miles, 5 miles. And right here is where the market would be. Or right here, sorry, is where the market would be. Okay. So you have to kind of figure out where on the triangle would you put this product, okay? So we know that it's bulk gaining, so we don't want to put it near our resources, okay? If it was bulk reducing, we would want to do that. So you're going to want to put it closer to the town up here somewhere, okay? Or, I don't think this red star is, so I don't know why the stars are here. This is a different version than I've seen. Or you would want it really close to your transportation, right? So that could make sense too. If you couldn't put it so close to the town, then like here, you can put it right on the train if you have the factory right next to the tracks, and then it goes straight to the town, rather than having to go from your resources, then to the rail juncture, then to Thirsty Town. Does that make sense? So that would be the smartest place to put that kind of factoring. I will go over this more in class, don't you worry, but I do want you to kind of get an idea of it. Okay. According to the Weber model, its best interest is to minimize labor and transportation costs by taking advantage of something we call agglomerations. Okay, so an agglomeration, this is also something that is not very well talked about in your book, is when like industries, so industries that are similar, locate close together so that they can share infrastructure and they can share the labor pool for that industry. So an example is Silicon Valley, okay? So Silicon Valley, right over the hill, is where a bunch of tech companies exist, right? Like Google has a headquarters there, and Yahoo, and it shows you in this map all of the different tech companies that are close together. And the point of that is anybody in tech now has the same location that they can all go to, and it means that they can share resources, right? Like today we're talking about like Wi-Fi even as a resource, right? Like the internet capabilities, they can all conglomerate and use those together. That makes sense? The Research Triangle in North Carolina, which I just visited a couple of weeks ago, is another example. You have a triangle of big colleges, right? Duke, North Carolina University for the Tar Heels. All of those together do a lot of research, right? That's what colleges do besides educate people. They do a lot of research, professors, and part of the job of any professor is also to research and to publish their research, right? So that's another example. So agglomerations, it's last year lots of people were calling it, oh, it's like a strip mall. Like, no, because strip malls, they're not sharing the same resources. They're not pulling the same labor typically. So not a strip mall. It's bigger than a strip mall, okay? It's a bigger scale. So Silicon Valley is a really good example. Agglomerations, okay? So this is a good way to minimize transportation and labor costs by sticking together. So you might notice some of those around town, like, oh, it's weird that all of the, whatevers are close together like that. There's a reason they do that. It's called an agglomeration. Okie doke. Oh, yes, I forgot I did this. So here's the Research Triangle. Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill is where I was. That's where, North Carolina University is. So, and in that, here's all of these different organizations that also rely a lot on research, right? So they're all together over there. Okie doke. That is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you back here in a second because I'm going to do the next one.